Good evening. Notre Dame Cathedral came to within half an hour of being totally destroyed last night, according to a French government minister who praised the speed and bravery of the firefighters tackling the blaze. More than 400 worked through the night to bring the flames under control. Around 20 entered the stone towers themselves, where fires have broken out, to stop them collapsing. Tonight, President Macron addressed the nation and vowed to restore the cathedral within 5 years. More than €500 million has already been pledged by individuals and businesses wanting to help. We still don't know the cause of the fire, but smoke emerged from the building, which was being renovated early yesterday evening. It appears to have started beneath the 315-foot spire, spreading north and south along the timber roof. It then travelled along the eastern section and the other way, too, towards the towers. Then the 19th century spire itself collapsed. But incredibly, they not only saved the building, but also numerous priceless artefacts from inside the cathedral. Our first report is from our Paris correspondent, Lucy Williamson.
Words were hard to find last night to describe this loss, to absorb this scene. What burned with Notre Dame, high above the Paris skyline, was 800 years of history. For some, the physical anchor of Paris, the cultural soul of France. It took 23 minutes to confirm the fire alert and send emergency crews to the scene. The fire was spreading quickly. Oak rafters that had held the roof for centuries, turning to ash in the evening sky. The central spire holding out against its own destruction until the very last moment, its bell hanging clear and still in the flames. To tackle the blaze, fire crews scaled the cathedral's main towers. This was the first glimpse of what they faced. Footage of the building filmed from above, the flames mapping across against the night sky. Inside, burning embers were still falling when the first crews made their way in. The pews where people had been waiting for Mass that afternoon, now covered with smouldering rubble. The empty space lit from above by a blaze of fire where the roof had been.
We've saved the crown of thorns and St. Louis' tunic. I think we were able to save some chalices. The fire didn't reach the treasury, and then inside they tried to save some paintings, but, you know, it was impossible to save the big ones.
After 4 hours, firemen confirmed that the structure of the building had been saved. A test of faith for modern-day Paris. Notre Dame resisted the Nazis, one resident said. She's not going to leave us now. If last night was all about what had been lost, by morning the focus was on what had survived.
We now know since this morning that 15 or 30 minutes delay would have been critical to saving the cathedral, and so we salute the firefighters' courage.
Tonight, President Macron addressed the nation.
We found that what we thought was indestructible can be damaged. Everything that makes France is alive and therefore fragile. And yes, we will rebuild the Notre Dame Cathedral, and it will be more beautiful than before, and it will be done in 5 years.
The fire burned through most of the roof, but the stone structure and many of its treasures have been saved, including the crown of thorns some believe was worn by Jesus on the cross, several important paintings, the cathedral's medieval organ, and the famous rose windows. These photos were taken by one of the architects invited in to assess the building.
So with the vaults on one hand side, the walls and the flying buttresses around, so normally it should be stable, but I know that they are going to investigate to see if there is some risk or not for the building itself.
People came again today as if for reassurance, counting the damage, weighing their relief.
It's such a shock. I'm discovering it now. It's a symbolic building for us. It still is. It always will be.
You don't understand. You don't get it. How can that kind of thing can happen right now? It's impossible to accept that. So you just
for the life of all the Parisians and even in Europe and in the world. It exists as a symbol and we need it.
Investigators are working on the basis this was an accident. The fire is thought to have started on the roof. Many have questioned whether restoration being carried out on the building might have played a role. That restoration is now a much bigger project, and donations have poured in overnight. Hundreds of millions of euros so far. This is where France kept not just its relics, but its stories. A place to mark both heroism and loss. Those two things were felt here again last night. A new chapter in the tale of Notre Dame. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Paris.
Well, let's just give you an idea of how quickly the blaze took hold last night. The first reports of smoke came just before 7 o'clock local time, after the cathedral had closed to the public. In a little over an hour, the 19th century spire had gone. By 10 o'clock, officials were saying they may not be able to save the cathedral. But in that crucial window of time, just 15 to 30 minutes, firefighters finally managed to contain the flames, so that by 11 o'clock, the city's fire chief was able to declare that the cathedral's stone structure was safe after all. Saved too were a large number of priceless artefacts carried out of the cathedral as the fires burned above. Our arts correspondent David Sillito reports on what's been saved and how much can be restored.
There was a moment when you wondered if anything could survive this. However, the Great Rose window, tonight, it's rather battered and charred, but still largely intact. As pieces of roof crashed to the ground, a human chain helped remove more than 1,000 years of religious history. Amongst the objects saved, the crown of thorns, the tunic of St. Louis and dozens of other artworks. But that fire, the organ may have escaped the flames, but it's endured an ordeal of smoke and debris.
It's like a part of my life which is destroyed. I think it will be hard to see, so I'm a bit afraid about seeing it over the next few days probably.
Paintings have been lost. Some 5 to 10% of the artworks appear to be damaged or destroyed. And the building?
There is an enormous amount of damage inside. Some of the stones are damaged. The vaulted roof has disappeared, so we have a big job in front of us.
The giant gaps in the stone-vaulted ceiling tell their own story. But all this stonework has also helped protect parts of the interior. And great cathedrals have a history of recovering from fire. This was York Minster in 1984. Fire had turned the south transept into a gaping, sooty ruin.
We go on the high level on the scaffold and look across at the south transept, where the fire was.
35 years later, master mason John David took me to the top. A chance to see the restoration and remember the moment he stood beneath a collapsing roof of melting lead and burning timber.
The flames were shooting out the actual peak of the roof there, and gradually the lead was melting. And as the roof began to fall, some of the big bosses from the vault started thumping on the ground.
You were inside at this point?
Yes, yeah.
Everything you're looking at, tons of lead, oak, all went crashing to the ground that night. And what's amazing is that 35 years on, you'd have absolutely no idea there was a fire here. New stonework, it can...
But while there are many similarities, there is one big difference.
It's a huge job. Notre Dame has lost its choir, nave and 2 transepts. So it's a huge roof.
4 or 5 times the size we're talking about.
Yes, yeah.
But Master Joiner Jeff Brayshaw, another veteran of that day 35 years ago, feels optimistic.
To a visitor, could they tell the difference?
No, not at all.
It looks like a medieval roof we're looking at. And we're looking at your handiwork, aren't we?
And many others.
Today, the only visible memory in the Minster are 2 small scorch marks. The job may be huge, but the message to Notre Dame is one of hope. David Sillito, BBC News, York.
Well, last night, thousands of people stood in the streets around Notre Dame, watching in shock as the cathedral went up in flames. But this morning, Paris woke to find that its skyline hadn't been completely changed after all. Notre Dame was still standing, albeit badly damaged. Fergal Keane has been talking to Parisians about the impact of seeing their much-loved cathedral on the brink of destruction.
To everything there is a season, a time to break down, a time to build up. the biblical text so resonant when that which has stood for centuries is broken by fire. In the lives of Paris, this has been a day of solemn reflection. Father Philippe Marseille filmed the flames as the fire took hold. He was ordained in the cathedral and has worked there for decades. Notre Dame is my mother, he told me. I came into the spiritual life because of her. 31 years ago, I was ordained here. Today, my mother has been burned. She cries, but she still stands. Yet to see what's happened as only a French loss is to misunderstand the meaning of this city, the universality of its treasures. Francesca Harter is a German who lives in Paris because as a teenager she visited Notre Dame and was enchanted. Today she could feel hope in renewal.
It reminds me somehow that the church is not stones, it's not only culture, it's for me it's a living community actually. It's the people who go to the church who are the very core of our faith. So we are believing in hope being stronger than destruction, and in life being stronger than death, and life that will eventually win.
For generations, artists have sketched and painted on the banks of the Seine. Laurent Letourmy was here this morning to sketch the old spire from memory. He's not a religious man, but he is a proud Parisian, and through his art wants to give shape to what might rise once more. I am sad, but we are going to fight back, he says. We will find wood in the French forests and we'll build again. I can see the stained glass is still there. It is magnificent. It will be all right. There is no doubting the loss, but neither the determination to raise again the glory of Notre Dame. Fergal Keane, BBC News, Paris.
Well, let's go to Paris now, and our correspondent Lucy Williamson, who is there for us now. And 24 hours later, what is the mood tonight in Paris?
Well, I think there were many people here who felt they simply had to come down and see Notre Dame to comprehend what had happened here. All today, the streets around this cathedral have been packed with people gazing up, registering their grief, trying to find some kind of reassurance. And tonight as well, we've had a choir singing along the quayside here. Several hundred people have also staged a candlelit vigil just on the other side of the Seine, walking between two churches, singing hymns, saying hello to the people having drinks in the cafes as they pass. I think that the mood here last night was definitely one of shock. That's fading now into sadness, and tinged also with relief that after everything Notre Dame has been through, it is still standing and it will be rebuilt.
Lucy Williamson in Paris, thank you. It emerged today just how close Paris was to losing one of its most famous landmarks. The government said it was saved within a crucial 30-minute window. More than 400 firefighters worked through the night and risked their lives to ensure it didn't fall. Tonight, President Macron has vowed to rebuild it within 5 years, saying it would be even more beautiful. We'll leave you tonight with some of the extraordinary images from the last 24 hours. Good night.
It's devastating. It's overwhelming.
Notre Dame, une telle catastrophe.
Paris is crying now, not just me.
As a Christian, I want to be full of hope because we built this fantastic cathedral and we'll have to rebuild it